Maybe the traditional religions that everyone likes to reject, maybe they're not so crazy after all. Hi, I'm Michael Shevack, and welcome to Godsearch. You may not believe in God, and that's perfectly fine. You may believe in God, but are confused about what God is. That's fine. You may think the whole notion of God is not a matter of belief or not belief, it's just something which is dumb. You can be the most pious, incredibly righteous, and moral individual in the world and still have your doubts. But that's why we're here, because this is Godsearch. And we are here to explore it, to search for it, to never stop seeking answers, because even if you call it God, you're talking about a supreme mystery that is beyond any of us to fully, absolutely embody and encapsulize. It is just bigger than us all. Hi there. I'm Michael Shevack, and welcome to Godsearch. There's been so much change in the religious marketplace. So much so, as we said very, very early on, people don't like to use the word religion. They don't like the R term. They like the word S term for spirituality. And there is an enormous amount of spiritual activity out there in different viewpoints, most of which are designed in opposition to the traditional viewpoints. They try to take all of the flaws that have been in traditional mainstream religions and kind of correct it with a new perspective. The perspective actually is pretty ancient. It's just been put into new language, or it's borrowed on the mystical language from Hinduism or some of the more mystical teachings that took place in the 19th century Christianity or in Gnostic Christianity, which is earlier. And then they kind of repackage it in a way that it feels a little bit more palatable in a scientific age. But the question that I'd like to bring back up is, what's so bad with the traditional religious viewpoint? I'm going to make the case that it's been around for 4,000 years in various forms, and it must be because it still serves a very important purpose, and that purpose is irreplaceable. It is irreplaceable. Let me begin by asking the question of all questions. It's the one that causes the real problem that everyone has difficulties with, which is, does God exist? And that question always has a challenge. And the usual challenge is if there is a God, why is there evil? And there've been many, many marvelous books about it. Marvelous books. I'd like to take a different approach to it. Okay. And it's a daring approach. It might not be comfortable. It might not be comfortable. Okay. So let me just start with something which I think we can agree on would be something which is an evil. All right. I mean, there'll be people who will debate otherwise, but that's only going to prove the point. And one of those things I want to discuss is, let's say, something horrible, which is cannibalism. And I'm not talking cannibalism if you're stuck on a Peruvian mountain and you don't have any food and you make an agreement with other people to just, chow down on each other in order to stay alive. I'm not talking about that, but it's related to it. Let's suppose you have something which is really horrific, which is a human being who likes to eat little babies, brand new newborn babies. I can't think of anything more horrible. Actually, I probably could think of things that are pretty horrible, but I don't want to go worse than that. That's pretty bad. And I think generally speaking, anyone who would do that, people would say was either sick or they were definitely evil or whatever it is. It's a form of cannibalism that is beyond just eating to stay alive. Cannibalism is something that throughout centuries people have resorted to in order to just get enough protein to keep going. This is the kind of thing that is maddening because it's just simply for the sake of the delight of it when it's not needed. The person doesn't need it, but just delights in it and doesn't think twice about the destruction of the child, nor its hurt that it causes the other people around it. It's an evil. But here I want to take a look at it objectively. Even if you had something that is as horrific as baby cannibalism for the sport of it, right? Or the flavor of it. I hope I'm not offending anyone. Even this act of evil nourishes. That body that person has receives a breakdown of protein and nutrients the same way as if they went into the local supermarket and they got some kind of animal flesh and they proceeded to feed themselves. Now, here's the point that I'm making. On one hand, we can agree that this is a horrendous moral evil. I define moral the way I like to define it, in many podcasts before, where I defined it as a custom that is designed to preserve life for the individual and the group to which they belong on all possible scales of existence. Right? That is what is moral. That's the ideal model in any case. So here you have a situation which is egregiously immoral, but yet it still has good in it. It does nourish. Now, same thing might be said for something like a cancer where the individual is suffering horrendously. And yet, there are other agents that are part of the design of this world that are prospering from that act of cancer. They are living, they are thriving, in fact. So it is not merely an evil, it's an evil in a context which permits good at the same time. Wrap your head around it. There is no, and I am a subscriber to this is a Platonic teaching. Plato put it in the mouth of Socrates, and I think he was right. There is nothing anyone does in any form that is not there to design and create some kind of good to their lives, even in the horrendous use of free actions to satisfy yourself at the expense of others. Now, how does this evil take place? Well, first of all, let's take a look at evil nakedly. Evil is the use of a material force, like punching, bullets, a material force. And it is a concentrated use of that kind of material force in order to bring about your personal desire. And that personal desire takes place without a cognizance or even a care of its effect on others, primary and foremost and in the front is whether the individual satisfies him or herself or themselves or itself in all those pronouns. Evil is simply, in this sense, a concentration of the material force that exists already in creation, which we can witness. When a tree branch falls and accidentally falls on a little bunny rabbit, there is a kind of natural evil that has taken place. We don't think of it that way because we disregard the individuality of the bunny rabbit because it's more of a herd consciousness than it is an individual consciousness in the same way that we think of ourselves having an ego. But that material force which is built into the design of this world, we human beings, because of our technological abilities, have the ability to concentrate for our own egos, our own material identities, and shape it for the fulfillment of our desire, even if our desire is destructive to others and ultimately can be destructive to ourselves. A human being is capable of actually eating themselves to death if they should want to do that. That is a very, very strange creature that has that degree of freedom. And what is that freedom? That freedom is to be able to do what is not designed into the operation of earthly nature. We take what is in earthly nature and we mangle it. We reshape it for our own egos. This is the classic definition of evil that you'll find in the Garden of Eden story. It's in, an early childlike stage, but it amounts to the individual with their serpentine faculties, the little, serpent in the Garden of Eden, being able to materially coerce the forces of creation to do what they wish for themselves, independently of the effect it has on the snake and on the garden and on Adam. We separate, in that sense, from the unity of all existence and have a unity unto ourselves on a different scale, but nonetheless, it is a unity unto ourselves. Now, evil is a consequence of finitude. It's a consequence of the fact that we live in a world which allows a certain formation of separateness, of entityness, okay, of individuality in the extreme. Now, there are many, many spiritualists out there who criticize the separations and in the wars between separations in traditional religions. But you have to ask the question, for instance, in the simple experiment of Lavoisier on oxygen, is that how can you take something and put it in a sealed beaker of glass and the oxygen can be measured before and after you light it, and it can be accounted for. In other words, it's not used up. It's not used up. Okay, it's accountable. It's not destroyed. The matter is not destroyed. It changes form, but it's not destroyed. And the same goes for the law of the conservation of energy. Well, how can you have that unless indeed there is separation? There is actually separation. Not a sublime, incredible, perfect unity. We're all one, and that's one, I'm one, you're one, and all this stuff that is part of spiritual innovation, which is largely designed to oppose the austere separations and lines between good and evil and morality, which has been the métier of traditionalist religions. But the spiritualists go to the other side and say it is all one, it is all one, it is all soup, and we are all it, and it is us. And then you add to it some contemporary physics, which reduces everything to an indistinguishable field, and it creates some of the same philosophical questions that arose for Whitehead and others after this became a kind of proto-fascist Heideggerian belief system that got us kind of derailed in World War II. It was proto-fascist and proto-Nazi. There are separations that are very, very sacred. Sure, a newborn baby is nutrition to someone who is hungry. All right. Certainly, it is nutrition. It is therefore good. It serves. But the taking of a newborn baby, the abrogating of the individuality of that baby, the relationships of that baby to its parents, the relationships of love and continuity between the parents and the grandparents, all of society, which is welcoming new life into it, and an arbitrary, decadent, unnecessary destruction of that is a moral evil which is distinguished in a separation, which we call good and evil. So I want to come to the rescue of traditional religions here. And there are boundary lines between what is good and what is evil. And they may not be able to be very easily distinguished, as is my case in cannibalism, but there are boundaries. And we do need to observe the boundaries. We do need to teach the boundaries. We also need to learn to fear when we're going to walk over those boundaries because it can cause horror. So, bravo, traditional religions. If you're a traditional religionist out there, great. You are maintaining clear lines between good and evil. Heaven and hell, another thing entirely. We talked a little about that, but the clear lines between a good and an evil are something that are inescapable if you're human. All right. By the way, please go to yourgodsearch.com. This is not easy stuff, and I invite you to join the chorus of all the people who are clamoring to get in a word on Godsearch. I welcome it. Okay. So you have to make a distinction, look at cannibalism, between what is a natural good, like feeding yourself, satisfying a curiosity and a hunger, and what is a clear moral line of what is right and wrong for a human civilization that is larger than just the desire or the decadence of one person's desires and hungers. One person's desires and hungers. And this is the core of traditional religion. Now, we can debate some of the complexities, whether or not a homoerotic relationship is an absolute threat to all existence. I think it's a little overboard, but in principle, it can cause a difficulty if that's the only way people are using their sexuality. You have to have new babies. In principle, I would say the breaking of the Sabbath law as a principle is also a great evil. If human beings continue to work and they don't allow themselves to rest and they don't allow their animals to rest and they don't regard the essence of rest as essential for the well-being of themselves and other creatures and their society, it can go overboard. Of course, not everyone overworks. Some people actually rest. And the issue of this morality as principles and 100% wrong, 100% wrong, 100% this, 100% that is an issue of scale. By recording these boundary lines in the Bible and by pulling them out, there is a tendency to paint them as absolute edicts, which they are when they are legal principles that are there for people to govern their society. But these legal principles are not ontologically 100% good if you look carefully at them. There is no act of any kind that does not produce some form of good. It's part of it. Now, the reason is, I believe, is that the notion of God has to be expanded beyond what it seems to be. You could say that cannibalism of a newborn baby is a perfectly nutritious thing and it's part of nature's design. And in principle, it's no different than any animal that would raid the nest of any other animal and take a snack, in principle. But again, there is individuality and sacred individuality in individuals. And so it's not just the God of nature that is enough. You have to have the God of human nature, which respects separateness, and not just separateness, when there's material stuff inside a beaker and you're measuring it so that it stays separate and that it's contained. And the fact that the oxygen is in a beaker doesn't mean that the atoms, which are the oxygen, are the exact same atoms that are in the beaker, and therefore you can't really measure it because they blur. And this is all metaphysical stuff and mysticism out of its context. Okay. When you have a God of creation or nature, where these kind of things are part of the design, obviously, black widow spiders will eat their mates. That's not exactly for a human being what is a moral good. And when you know that you have to have an individuality, an approach to creation for individuals, such as human beings, then you have a God of morality. And the God of creation and the God of morality oftentimes are reduced to the God of nature on the earth, where you can eat an animal, a newborn, or the God of human nature, and these two become at war. Traditional religions, such as Judaism, Christianity, Islam, and others that have developed in that legacy, which is history, legacy of history. Traditional religions are forced, no matter how they maintain the critical importance of their laws, no matter how they maintain the right of the individual to have free will at the exact same time, it forces them all to look beyond either the God of creation, meaning the earth, or the God of human nature on earth, which is morality, and look beyond it to an order of God, an order of orders, a transnatural, I called it in an earlier podcast, you know, that transnatural awareness, that's transnatural substance and consciousness and beingness, reality that includes both these things within itself, and yet can permit the distinction between the natural earthly order and the human created order. That is the goal of all of the greatest and most noble traditional religions. How do they approach it? Not very clean, but they approach it through a living process called history, by which there is an evolution in human thought, an evolution in human emotion to expand the power of love to intervene and contend with the material power that can destroy, to allow human beings in free association to become successful and satisfy each other's desires in a very unique way, which is not competitive in a way that destroys, isn't just an individual taking for their hungers at the expense of other people, but is in a way that satisfies each other. This is what's called the golden rule. You do not do unto others what you would not have them do unto you, or said more positively, which is the more common way, is you do unto others what you would have them do unto you. That essential law distinguishes human hungers as a moral right to individual creativity, and distinguishes it also from the mere natural fact that such a usurping of human life, like baby cannibalism, can take place in the first place. Traditional religions are marvelous at keeping the separations between the natural order on earth, keeping the separation between that and human creativity and technology so that we are not restricted merely to the earthly nature. And that's what this whole global warming battle was about theologically, right? Is that we can be greater than mere earthly, natural. And what is so marvelous and noble about all of us is we seek beyond these two levels. We seek beyond it so that the God of creation, and specifically creation on earth, and the God of human morality, which safeguards the individual and safeguards the individual legally, well, that those gods have in common another level which includes them both. The traditional religions keep us going and growing. They keep us alive. They keep us searching for a God that is greater than a human invention or greater than merely the God of earthly nature. That is its amazing thing. And it pushes us forward in time so that we evolve and we continue to grow in ways that we cannot even conceive who will we become in the future. That's the value of traditional religion. It is called covenant. It is called history. It is a 4,000-year-old insight into the mechanics of being human, which we can't forget. So I feel like if we would stop bashing traditional religions and stop imposing more spiritualist viewpoints onto them in a way that detracts from them, and where we add, even if we're doing it because of our goodness, even if we're doing it because we're kind and loving and want to increase the spiritual awareness of people, we have to be careful not to antagonize traditional lines of religion in a way that just adds insult to the whole war that's going on, which is largely right now, it's been distilled down to a red team, blue team war. There is natural evil in the world. Volcanoes erupt and species are eradicated. It's natural evil. Evil is not merely created by human beings. Bad things happen. Moral evil is when we take the forces that are in nature and we concentrate them like any technology, and we do something for human beings without due consideration of that effect. That is the story of the Garden of Eden, and that story has not been resolved. The fundamental issue of how can God exist if there is evil? The answer is because God is creative. God cannot create that which is not creative, and that which is creative is not bound to the precedent that it comes from, the forms that it comes from, and apple carts are designed to be upset. We are capable of doing it because that is how this world is designed. We're designed to be able to do evil. Is it ideal? No. Is it desirable? No. Does it happen? Yes. Does it need to be contained? Yes. Is a moral order needed? Yes. Does it have to be imposed at times? Yes. Every child has to learn to be toilet trained. It doesn't come naturally. So as we go forward, I'd like to remove this war between spiritual religions and religious religions. It is a false dichotomy that is ripping apart our thinking as human beings. It's relatively new. We had to go there, especially as I talked about in podcast 8. We had to go there after Hiroshima. We had to go there after the error that was in the Holocaust theologically. We just had to go there. But it is time to go past it. The reason we are stuck right now between the red team and the blue team is because the problem that was underneath the religious versus the spiritual, the scientific versus the moral, was not solved. A unified view of human morality and human science and human spirituality, which is greater than what is measurable, and some kind of quantum field, you like that term, use it, or some kind of God consciousness, you like that, use it, that somehow includes all and maintains distinction between all. That solution to human thought has never been forged. Hey, you're on Godsearch. Go to yourgodsearch.com and give me your views on how to bring them together. I thought it was time to just visit the old theodical question. If God is there, why is there evil? Theodicy, theodice, right? A saying about God, a speaking of God. It's the greatest challenge. It's been going around for hundreds of years. We've not solved it. It is time in this day and age to solve it. And it is time to put this incredibly divisive and destructive argumentation between what is spiritual and what is religious. It is time to put it aside and get clarity. Get clarity. It's going to be threatening. It's going to threaten traditionalists, but they have a very important view. Do not ignore them. It's going to threaten spiritualists who may find that their personal freedoms become questioned and the rightness of it. It is very threatening, but both are going to be threatened because each, as we said way back, has a piece of the knowledge, and we need new knowledge in order to complete it. Anyway, this is Michael Shevack. Thank you for being with me. I'm in a heat stroke. We have a heat wave. I happen to be in Paris, and there's a heat wave, and I'm not thinking, and I really do apologize for the intrusion of that ringing on my phone. All right, I apologize for that. No one's perfect, and that's part of the reason there's good and evil as well. All right, so I'll see you next week. Same time, same channel, about 5:45 Eastern Day time. And God bless. Uncover God. Discover God. And please recover your sanity from all of this craziness out there that is not coherent and it doesn't make sense. God is mysterious and it's beyond sense. As you search for it, you'll discover that for yourself. But it also makes common sense. Also, not either or, both and. Michael Shevack, thanks for being here. God bless. Bye-bye.